The leaders of the African financial industry are overwhelmingly optimistic about the 3-year economic outlook. This is what emerged from the recent barometer of the African financial industry presented by AFIS, the Africa Financial Industry Summit, and Deloitte. How can we analyze this optimism? We interviewed Aristide Ouattara in Paris. He is the head of the West African financial industry at Deloitte. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Aristide Ouattara, hello. Political instability, security risk and cybercrime worry leaders of the African financial industry. And yet, they remain very optimistic. How do you explain this result?
The optimism is real, and it comes from the fact that managers are confident about the degree of resilience of these banks. Despite this risk, they believe they have the capacity to go beyond. So, these financial institutions have demonstrated their resilience in recent crises, and in addition, its leaders, in any case, are much more attentive to opportunities. In other words, more focused by the opportunities than the risk behind them.
The report says that the management of these risks that you mentioned, in particular the risk of cybercrime, is sometimes done to the detriment of financing the real economy. What did you notice concretely?
The barometer highlights good financial performance of these financial institutions despite all this economic context and all these emerging risks. It turns out that these institutions have put a number of measures in place, classic mitigation management measures, of course. This is the term used for these risks, and it will at some point lead them to do what we call the rationalization of their service offering. Therefore, they will select clients based on their risk level, on their ability to absorb this risk as well. And all this is imposed in particular by prudential standards, whether in the banking industry or in the insurance level, which means that this institution must limit their financing capacity to match their own funds and therefore maintain a level of profitability legally required by investors but also by regulators. At some point, a trade-off must be made between the volume of financing and compliance with these different standards and profitability requirements. So we face a rationalization of the offer, which unfortunately can have an impact on the financing of the real economy.
What about the departure of major international banking groups? Is this an opportunity for the African financial industry?
There is clearly an opportunity today for these groups with a Pan-African vocation, which must strengthen their capacity, their striking force. So it is very interesting for these groups, whether they are banking or insurance groups, to expand by acquiring all subsidiaries which are in the process of being left aside by international groups.
Libérés par des groupes internationaux. Donc aujourd'hui, on voit effectivement.
So today, we are actually seeing major players like Vista Bank, like Coris, and other groups to effectively take the place of these international institutions. And what's more, it's a great opportunity because when they leave, their subsidiaries, which indeed have high-level standards, which will trigger a sort of leveling up. So this is clearly an opportunity. It will allow us to have real Pan-African champions.
Pan-Africain.
There's an obstacle, the whole Pan-African prudential harmonization part, which is very important for this industry. Where are we and what remains to be done?
So this topic is extremely important for the African financial industry. This is a fundamental theme since today we have 41 central banks, which means 41 regulations, regulatory frameworks, and so on. When we are a Pan-African banking group, for example, we have the vocation to be present everywhere in Africa. We would have to manage 41 regulations, and that is something which is impossible if we want to optimize the allocation of resources, capital, and liquidity. So we really need a certain convergence, and therefore why we are trying. When I say we, it is in any case the leaders of the financial industry. They were very unanimous on the fact that we must create a unified framework. So why the African Banking Authority or an African Banking Union? Because these are institutions that have existed almost everywhere in the world, and that can be duplicated in Africa. You should know that the idea of creating the African Central Bank, which will also be part of the necessary pillars before moving towards this banking union, is an idea that has been put on the table in 2013 in Nigeria by the African Union and which is still being implemented. But there are some delays, so we must reactivate these initiatives, which will require collaboration at all levels, at the level of governments, at the level of the industry, and at the level of all stakeholders, so that we truly have a regulatory framework which is convergent, not unique, but convergent, which can allow the emergence of pan-African financial institutions.
Aristide Ouattara, thank you very much.
Je vous remercie.